And now Richie Burke, founder of GoGedders Marketing and Media and host of GoGedders podcast, will give a brief few remarks on the state of audio and the rise of podcasting as a platform. Immediately after his remarks, he'll conduct a live podcast interviewing two of our Rotary scholars, Mayra Alaniz and Kenyon Terrill, as well as Rotarian and mentor Eric Isbister. Richie, thanks.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me today. As Ed said, I'll be going over the current state of audio, kind of how we started and grew our podcast over the last couple years for about 10 minutes. I'll go through that quickly, and then we'll do a live podcast, GoGedders podcast, highlighting to the Rotary scholars, Kenyon and Mayra, and one of the mentors, Eric, and then I'll turn that into podcast form, video form, and be promoting the program over the next few weeks, which should be exciting. So before we dive in, just a few highlights about myself. Grew up in Madison, went to Marquette, and converted from a Badger fan into a Golden Eagle fan. I did not found Marquette, that would have been pretty cool and ambitious. I founded GGMM, Go-Getter Marketing and Media, immediately after Marquette in 2011. We're a marketing company. We have a staff of 8 down in St. Francis and get to work with a lot of local brands as well as companies all across the country, help them market their business, and started the Go-Gedders podcast in 2016, which I'll be diving into. A couple other highlights. I've been a member of this amazing organization for the last few years. Couldn't resist Mary McCormick's recruiting. And I am a former Rotary Golf Scramble champion. You can see a photo there of my teammates. I think I was too busy actually golfing to be in that photo at the time, but they supplied a lot of drinks, music, and laughter. It was a full team effort to win that day, so it's my team. So the audio age. So there's a lot of interesting things going on right now in the space. There's interesting things with podcast, with overall voice and audio technologies, which we'll be diving into. Some of the things are internet searches are going to be about 50% voice by next year alone, and this really speaks to the rise of Google Homes, which are these devices. By the way, how many of you have one of these in your house? Google Home, Alexa. How many of you had one 2 years ago? Anyone? A few. They've really risen over the last couple of years. 73 million Americans are listening to podcasts right now. It's been growing very steadily. And on average, listeners consume 85% of each episode, which in a world today where we're battling for people's attention, audio can be a very powerful medium, and I'll go to the next slide as I'm talking. And one of the reasons is convenience, where written word and video, it really requires our full attention on that platform to consume that content if we're reading or watching, whereas audio is a very passive medium that plays in the background while you're doing any of the following activities and more up there. Another thing is as humans, we're very addicted to speed and convenience, and me talking to this thing and saying, "Hey Google, what's the weather?" opposed to taking out this outdated piece of technology, pulling it out of my pocket, opening it, scrolling over to the weather app, waiting for it to load and telling everyone it's 46 degrees right now. That saved me about 10 seconds, right? And it's kind of ironic because as lazy as we can be as human beings, we actually care a lot about those 10 seconds. I'm sure a lot of you notice when your internet speed is lagging like half a second or a second. It's a very fast-paced world, and that is why these things have grown like that over the last few years and will continue to keep trending from about 7% just in 2016 to 75% in 2020 is just because we care about those 10 seconds, and anytime something is produced that helps with speed or is more convenient for us, we're going to jump on it. So that really speaks to the rise of these, and people who can take advantage of this technology right now and moving forward are going to be positioned very well for the future. So backtracking a little bit, simply put, what is a podcast? It's pretty much on-demand radio. This technology is nothing new. People were audio blogging back in the 1980s. There were a couple events on there that were big, like iTunes natively picking up podcasting back in 2005. And you see the steady growth around 2013, 2014. There was a bit of a jump when shows like Serial and Gimlet Media's startup and other shows were being produced and really pushed on the medium. But it's never really experienced true hockey stick growth that you see in certain industries and with certain startups. It's just been, again, it's 20% year over year. That's what it's continued to projecting to be, but it's finally gotten to a point, I feel, in the last year where it's getting a lot of corporate attention and brands are starting to utilize this platform. And one of the big things that happened is Spotify, a large music streaming platform, bought Gimlet Media for, I believe, around $250 million and Anchor for about another $100 million, and say they're going to push $400 to $500 million in acquisitions this year, a lot focused on podcasting. And this is basically them sending a clear message to Apple and Google that, hey, it's an all-out warfare and we're going to try and win this platform. And there's a lot at stake between Apple, Google, Spotify, and some of the other players in the game on who can win all of our attention as this platform gets more and more powerful. So if brands like this are investing, companies like this are investing that much money in this technology alone, that just speaks to the importance of this and where things are going from a podcasting standpoint. In podcasting, how many people in here listen to podcasts? So a lot. So that says something. And if you look at the research too, this is not something for college kids. This is not Snapchat for teenagers. This is a medium where you actually look, in the most sizable demographic on here is the 35 to 54-year-old age range. But when we talk to potential clients about podcasting, a lot of them know, oh, well, I want to reach C-suite people. I want to reach whoever that demographic is, and they're curious about that. And in reality, it's spread out. And you can see along with that, there's been, again, not hockey stick growth, but just steady growth among those demographics over the last 5 years or so. So now I'm going to go over how I started and grew our podcast, the GoGedders podcast, before we get into the panel discussion today. And just an overview of the show. We cover Milwaukee-based topics. We do a lot of themed episodes with multiple people. We also do one-on-one interviews. David Cooks is over there. He's been on the show. I could only have one basketball person on there, so Sidney Moncrief slightly beat him out for this slide, but that was a good episode. So anyway, we cover topics. We did as you can see, there's a streetcar debate episode. We had Andy Nunemaker, friend of Rotary, but not a big fan of the streetcar, with a couple other leaders, did a debate on that. Came to the conclusion that now that it's here, we all want it to succeed. Did a episode with Chuck Swabadu, who took Cree, the LED lighting company, from $6 million to $1.6 billion, as well as Kelly Fitzsimmons, who just came out with her new book and has launched 6 companies on how to innovate in 2019, which is a good episode. We also did one in experts dating advice to Milwaukee men. I am not the expert on that one. That episode mostly consisted of me, fans submitting questions from my single friends without them submitting them to a matchmaker, but most of them took it well, so it worked out. We actually live called a couple of them too, caught them off guard. So a wide range of content, and we generate about 8,000 downloads a month, which is cool for me because we're telling a lot of positive stories on a city that can be portrayed very poorly in the media. So we try and get a lot of positive things about Milwaukee out there, and we've done 73 episodes to date, highlighting well over 100 leaders, and we started it back in 2016. Can you guys hear me fine here? Should I get closer? Okay, sounds good. So how the GoGedders podcast, or the GoGedders, almost started. I wanted to start a YouTube show in 2012, the GoGedders. I was meeting all these amazing people after starting my business. I wanted to highlight their stories on a medium that they weren't really being highlighted in Milwaukee, so started this YouTube show. One interview survived. The other 5 were on a hard drive that crashed, and unfortunately the first iteration of my business crashed around the same point in time, so it just was not meant to be, and ended up pivoting the business and kind of putting this idea on hiatus. So how it actually began, we launched the show in 2016, kind of with a contest, a media push, again, highlighting leaders, launched with 5 episodes, and it got a lot of traction immediately. And in that first season, we ended up doing 37 episodes, highlighting 44 leaders, had a couple 100,000 social media video views on those episodes. And one of the things that has made the show successful is podcasting can serve as a content engine. We'll do a half-hour podcast, which can be an anchor to content, and then we'll chop up 2 or 3 Facebook, LinkedIn videos and do some written content as well. So just really pushing it out across all mediums, and that's worked well for us. It brought in a good chunk of new revenue for our business based off exposure and guests from the show, and secured a media partnership with On Milwaukee, which was cool for us at that point in time. We still work with them today. And then something happened. I hired Gabe, who's on there, as a copywriter, but he produces music on the side, and he's an audio engineer, and he basically told me we were doing everything wrong, which was true. We were recording episodes on a $60 mic I got off Amazon in a wide open room in our old office, which was kind of in a strip mall, and the quality was not very good of the show. It still did well because it was different and unique and the content was good, but he told us if we were going to be doing this seriously, we needed to significantly upgrade. So we did that. We actually moved office spaces, built out a studio, and upgraded equipment and started offering it as a service. And that kind of brings me to one of my favorite business quotes, which is, it's good to be better, but it's better to be different. And I think this applies to a lot of brands, especially in today's crowded marketplace. And I look back at what we did with podcasting, and a lot of it was not done well, but it was much different at that point in time, and it resonated with the audience, and it was unique content, and that's how it took off. So I just kind of keep this in mind with our business and companies we work with, that it's good to be better, but it's better to be different and really stand out in the marketplace. And then the GoGedders podcast, a revamped season 2. Again, we've done 73 episodes, have gotten a lot more exposure, events like this, a lot of live conferences, and it's enabled us to launch a podcast marketing service as part of our company, and that's our new studio on the right over there, which is a slight upgrade from that photo on the right, which kind of looks like a scene from that 70s show or something. So we've done that, and one of the reasons we do this is there's still not a lot of companies producing podcasts. There's about 700,000 active shows, which may seem like a lot, but you compare that to 400 million active blogs, and it's a very small fraction. So there's still a lot of white space, and I'm a firm believer every brand is going to be producing audio content in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we're just kind of positioning our business in that spot. So yeah, our service, we've actually got to launch a few Milwaukee-related shows recently. We launched one for Colliers, which is cool. You guys should check that out. On Milwaukee as a foodie podcast, and then for Ellen Becker Investment Group, just launched a couple more this week, and currently working on some with Trek and Marquette, which is cool as someone who has ties to Trek and a Marquette alum. So hopefully we'll have something special to announce in the next several months when those projects and shows come out. So anyway, there's a very kind of brief synopsis on the state of audio and how we've grown our show and used this as a platform to sell the brands. I know that was quick, so if any of you guys ever want to talk podcasting, I'm happy to do so. And at this point, I'd like to call up Mayra, Kenyon, and Eric. Okay, so today we're going to be highlighting the Rotary Club of Milwaukee Scholarship Program. Just some brief clip notes on the program for people listening to the podcast, and those of you in the audience who aren't fully up to speed with the program. It was started by a small group of Rotarians in 2008, including Eric, who's up here right now. 55 students have gone through the program. 23 graduates today, and the program focuses on low-income first-generation college students. One thing that makes the program special is that the graduation rate of first-generation low-income students is 11% nationally, and it's 55% in this program, so about a 5 times increase that the Rotary Scholarship Committee has done. So, diving in, Eric, I want to start with you. Can you just let everyone know why this program started back in 2008 and what you guys were hoping to accomplish with it?
Two things. Not enough good can be said about how proud people in this club should be about the Scholarship Committee. This is one of the best things the Rotary Club of Milwaukee does, help these students. The next thing, if I can grind my axe a little bit, not enough good can be said about the man whose idea this was, the man who ramrodded it through in the beginning and does the Herculean work every year. That's Jim Miller. I'll give you just one example of what Jim does and has done every year. He takes all the applications. This year there were 57. The applications are extensive. He reads them all. He gels the students down into a single page of notes on that individual student. That allows the next group, the people that pick the students to interview, a concise, consistent thing to make that choice from. That's a lot of work. That makes this committee work. What was the question you asked me?
Why did it start initially? How did this come together? And what did you guys hope to accomplish at the beginning?
Interesting. So it started as a nugget, Jim Miller's idea. There were a group of us, I forget exactly, I think something like 7 in the initial committee. And we grew from there. We did things like we traveled up to Madison to find out how they did their scholarship committee, and we learned and we've adjusted our process. One of the things we're the most proud of is there's a robust process now for giving scholarships to the right students.
Awesome. And Kenyon, let's go to you. Can you let everyone know about your backstory, just growing up in Milwaukee, going to Marquette High School, and how you ended up as a Rotary Scholar?
Sure. I was born and raised in Milwaukee. I was raised on the north side. I went to Marquette University High School, which was, the demographic of that school was quite different from anything I grew up around. It was not something I was quite used to as far as socioeconomic privilege of many of the students that went there. I didn't really find any kinship in many of the people I met, but I found my niche, I'd say, in theater. I'm a theater major now at Fordham University, and that brings me to how I initially came into contact with the Rotary Club. I applied for this scholarship because I was looking for additional funds and aids, and it was actually Jackie Barber who first introduced me to the scholarship, and she advised me to apply for it, and I did.
Awesome. Mayra, let's go over to you. What's your backstory and how did you get involved in the program?
Sure. Oh, is mine on?
And what are you up to now? So for context, Kenyon is just finished up his freshman year at Fordham, right?
Yes, I did. I'm a rising sophomore.
Yes, awesome. And Mayra graduated from Georgetown, and I'll let you go from there. But
Yeah, so I'm Mayra Alaniz, born and raised on the south side of Milwaukee, so I guess more near south side, around Mitchell Street, Kosciuszko Park, if anyone knows that kind of area. So that's where I grew up, and both my parents are Mexican immigrants. I actually spent 6 years of my early childhood living in Mexico, so learned Spanish. So definitely had that sort of migrant experience with my family coming here. And I have had sort of various different types of schooling, public, private, charter, and I actually graduated from South Division High School. which is where I learned about the scholarship. Actually, when I was my senior year, I heard a friend who was talking about the scholarship that they had advised her to apply for. And I was thinking about it, and I went to my counselor and I said, hey, I'm thinking about applying for this scholarship. And he was like, he kind of knew at the time I was like applying for everything. And thankfully, and I think through a lot of hard work, was really killing the scholarship game. I was like, yes, like getting all these things. And he was kind of like, maybe you should let someone else have this one. And I was like, no, I'm going to apply. And I'm really thankful that it worked out because I was actually placed with Susan Lloyd, who's my mentor. She's here. And it's just been a really good program. I'm not sure what other pieces you'd like me to share at this moment about my story, but that's how I came to the Rotary Scholars Program.
So when I talked to both of you on the phone, we touched a lot on mentorship, and even with you, Eric, we talked about how a lot of scholarships are more monetary, where this one, the real value is in the mentorship. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, one of the things that this club, that this scholarship committee does that a lot of other ones don't do is the mentoring. We assign 2 mentors to each student, and that's rare. The one thing I would like to get across to all the people in the club is you too can be a mentor. It doesn't take a college degree in mentoring. You would be surprised how simple it is to help. Just stories of maybe when you went to college or your children went to college can be very helpful to students just going through the maze at this time.
Kenyon, let's go to you. Can you talk about your mentor and kind of what that's meant to you and how it's helped you?
I really can't highlight enough how my mentor was Jim Milner. I wasn't assigned 2 mentors, but I didn't need to. Jim has been just fantastic. An excellent resource for me when I am feeling any self-doubt or doubting my propensity as a student or doubting my future and anything is unclear. In addition to that, he just serves as a role model because he is extremely successful, but he's also quite generous, and I hope to emulate that. And I really can't. Is he here today? Hey, Jim.
Mayra, let's go over to you. What's your experience been like with your mentor?
Sure. So I think one thing I always kind of have to say is like, I definitely could have gone so I went to Georgetown. I studied government, and I feel like having my mentor throughout that experience was really helpful. One, for me to just keep going. When I got to my sophomore year, I was definitely feeling really burnt out. I wasn't really used to the academic rigor of a school like Georgetown. I think I initially was like, oh my gosh, I want to go here because everyone says it's a good school, and I got in. But I'm not completely sure how prepared I was for that type of academic rigor. And so I was burning out, and I remember I would talk to Susan. We would check in over the summer, and there were times where I was like, maybe I should have just stayed home. Maybe I should have just gone to Marquette. Maybe I need to take a break. And it was always good, I think, having worked with students from my background, being at Zellber. She was really understanding, I think, of what my personal circumstances were like at home. And she was just always an ear, and someone who was understanding. If I said I think I need to come back home, I think she was always willing to listen, but also willing to push me and say, well, why are you thinking about coming back home? Are you afraid that you're going to fail, or are you just coming back to comfort? And so really it was having that mentor there, having her kind of push me and listen to me in ways that my parents couldn't really relate to, was for me, I think, a really big factor in me just pushing forward and making sure that I got that degree. And then the other piece was, I feel like I could have gotten a degree, but without the experience that I did in the workforce, I don't know where I would have ended up having graduated with a degree. And my mentor, Susan, and also John Ridley were really good about helping me apply for things every summer and making sure that I was, not just getting a degree and, getting scholarships along the way, but more so like, how are you actually going to be integrated into the workforce once you have this really valuable piece of paper called a diploma. So, the mentorship is really, really key in getting your foot in the door and really understanding how things work in the real world.
Awesome. So I feel like Mayra and Kenyon, you guys have a unique perspective on the city of Milwaukee itself. Kenyon, you grew up on the north side, predominantly black neighborhood, ended up going to Marquette High School. Mayra, south side, very Latino neighborhood, ended up going to South Division. And then now you're in New York, you went to DC. What are you guys' thoughts on Milwaukee, and was that kind of like going from a neighborhood that was predominantly your race to kind of more of a white school? Either one of you can start.
The question was, how do I view Milwaukee after my experience in New York, or just how do I view Milwaukee in general?
I threw a bunch out. We can go with how you view Milwaukee in general and take it from there.
Milwaukee is my home, and I love it very much. However, I do think there's so much we can do as far as infrastructure and education and opportunities for inner city black youth. I think there is a tremendous amount of potential, but sometimes it is not given the support, and youth are not given the support and the encouragement that we need to be successful. And after being in New York and after my time just spending so much time around all these different people from all these different places, I realized that Milwaukee does have something quite special. And my DNA is infused with this city, and there's a spirit that we have in Milwaukee that makes us quite unique, I think, and that is something to be celebrated, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, I feel like I have a also really complex relationship with Milwaukee. Like, I love it here. Born and raised, made a very conscious decision after I graduated from Georgetown that I wanted to come here, which I think was like ill-advised by everyone I talked to. Was like, why are you going back there? But I think from being away, the one thing that I learned about our city is that it is special in that I do feel like we have that, like, what do they say, like mid-sized city feel for like, we have basically everything that Chicago has, right, or that our larger city has. It's just maybe doesn't have as much support, or there's not as many, right? And how that sort of came influenced me was I had a lot of Latino friends, obviously, when I was at Georgetown. Some from really big cities like Houston, LA, and you hear about the support systems that they have in those cities for low-income first-generation students. And I would come back to Milwaukee, and it was like, those things just didn't exist here. And I think it kind of tied into that whole mid-sized city feel that maybe there are these sort of great programs and resources that larger cities have that haven't come here yet for whatever reason, or that haven't been started here. And so that's, I think, for me, a really unique opportunity coming back and kind of seeing like where can I fit into all of that, into part of that solution for our city, to be able to provide those resources, because we don't really necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. There are cities that are doing really good work, and this program, I think, is a good place to start, and that it's already here. So I think that kind of explains a little bit about my relationship with the city. I love it, and I want to see it improve and grow. The other piece of what you were talking about particularly is definitely around like the segregation in the city. It's definitely something that I experienced. And growing up, I loved being on the South Side because there were people like me. And like there are celebrations, you know, that are cultural, like, and that I can celebrate, like my ethnicity and where my parents come from. But it was really hard when then I will go off to Georgetown and like I didn't know what it was like to be like a predominantly white institution. And so my natural reaction is to like, you know, go back to what's comfortable, because I don't know how to have a conversation with someone who I feel like doesn't look like me, or I'm like, oh, is that person gonna know how to relate to me? Am I gonna know how to relate to them? And I think all of that was just in part, I had never had an experience like going to Marquette, you know, where you kind of get to test that out in a way. I went to South Division and like, you know, it was predominantly minorities, but definitely like hadn't had very much interaction with like basically white people. So yeah, I think it's been a journey for me to like understand how to like get over myself and like how I think people think of me, and to stop labeling other people as well. A lot of the times I would go into conversations and I'm like, oh, they probably like don't get my background. They don't know where I come from. They're probably gonna label me just because of experience I had had in the city, you know, where people told me to stop speaking Spanish, you know, or would tell my parents to go back to where you came from. Just like those negative experiences really shaped me. And so I projected that. And whenever I would come into a conversation, I'd be like, oh my God, you know, is someone gonna think that of me? So I've learned, I think, now that I've come back, now that I've definitely been at Georgetown, how to kind of navigate those relationships. And I think it's somewhere where our city could really grow, like getting to know people, how to really break those barriers of our neighborhoods. Because there is a great story, you know, that is behind every person, and there's a lot that we can grow, and I think it helps to push those boundaries of labeling each other.
And Mayra, going off of that, can you discuss more why you chose to come to Milwaukee after graduating opposed to going somewhere else, and what you hope to do here?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of positive momentum, right? Everyone's talking about that, like in our city. There's a lot of growth that's happening. And I feel like maybe it's always been there. I don't know. Growing up, I didn't pay attention to it until like now, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, like there's all this excitement happening downtown, and I see like our neighborhood associations doing a lot of really good work. And so I think the energy that I felt like was in this city was one thing that kind of brought me back. But also it was like just getting to know more of the city, like just the diversity of it. The beauty, like both the resources that are not here, the ones that are here. It's just like I think it's just a love for the city and like wanting to get to know it more. That's what brought me back.
Eric, did you have something?
Yeah, one thing to put out is Maya was one of our first named scholarships, a Smith Family Scholarship, if I remember correctly. That's another way we're trying to grow this committee, is with named scholarships. It takes $50,000. What we do is we put that in the Rotary account, and we give scholarships every year off of the interest. So we would like more people to think of having a named scholarship in their name. It'll last forever.
And Kenyon, so when we were talking on the phone before this, you kind of let me know where you want your career to go. You're out in New York right now, but you mentioned coming back too. Can you touch on that?
Yes, sir. I think there's such a vibrant creative community in Milwaukee, and I'd like to contribute to that after graduating. And I hope I can intertwine social activism with creative expression, because I think those two things together are quite potent, and they can cause a lot of like good change for a community. So that's what I hope to do, but there's some time, you know. I got to.
And Eric, I want to end with you, and then we'll have about 5 minutes for questions for anyone up here. But Eric, as someone who started this, what are you most proud of regarding the program?
one of the attributes we use to pick the students. And oh, by the way, that's a very difficult job. When Jim goes through all of the applications, he writes the list, then the next piece of real work happens where they have to take between 50 and 70 applications, cut it down to a group that's able to be interviewed. We've learned that the best place to do the interviews is in the schools. And we'll go, in this year I think there was 12 people interviewed, and then we're picking, I think, six students this year. One of the attributes for the students is, are they going to graduate and come back to Milwaukee and help the Rotary Club of Milwaukee make Milwaukee a better city?
Great, we'll end on that. Let's give these guys a hand, then we'll do some questions. Yes. The question was to Kenyon and Mayra, do they look forward to having the opportunity to be mentors themselves in the future?
Yeah, I definitely do. I've been asked back to come back to some of the scholarships receptions that they have, and it's been a good way for me to connect with other students and really just kind of serve as a model to say, like, you got this, keep going, and just informally I also just mentor people along the way.
If I could follow up on the question, one of the things we've done through the years is to keep notes of things, and I have a couple of bullets here. Lessons learned from upperclassmen scholarships to freshmen. High school didn't prepare me for what was put in front of me at college. My freshman year has been pretty rocky. The amount of knowledge my two mentors taught me has been incredible. I had to learn to live with roommates and get my studying done. I was one of 3 minority students in my classes. I began to worry if I could make it through. I was scared of college and all the new things. The challenges have been difficult, but possible to overcome. I quickly realized it wasn't as scary as I expected.
Kenyon, did you want to touch on being a mentor at all in the future?
I'm very excited at the prospect of being a mentor. I think there are chances for me to be a mentor right now, just in leading the best life that I can and leaving a good example for like younger generations. I know like even my little brother, like he says like he wants to go to New York. I'm like, stay in school, just like take care of that and don't give in to a lot of the pressures that can be placed on young black men to kind of, children in general, I think, to kind of abandon school. And I think that's one way I'm a mentor right now, but I look forward to perhaps doing something like this on a major scale in the future, yeah.
Awesome. Mary?
As a freshman, I was able to begin auditioning for shows in Fordham. So I had the chance to participate in 3 shows this year. I did Dutchman by Amiri Baraka. There was a student-written show called Intelligence that I took part in. And I had my main stage debut, which is the larger auditorium at Fordham. And that was Satellites, written by Deanna Sun. So I've had a lot of theater opportunities quite quickly, and it's given me an opportunity to grow in my skills. But also, I think I've learned a lot about acting and the art of creating from just observing theater and going to see Broadway shows and things like that. We get discounted tickets, which is really cool. And so we get to see like a lot of Broadway shows, and that was excellent, yeah.
Yeah, so I majored in government. My interest was particularly when I started in education policy, just kind of from my upbringing. And in college, during my college years, I got to do quite a few internships here in Milwaukee. Namely, I think a lot of the ones that are with the city of Milwaukee, had quite a long relationship with them currently as well. So MKE Plays, which is an organization that builds parks, city-owned parks around the city of Milwaukee. So I worked with them and Susan actually on developing the evaluation for that program to see how it was kind of working in the communities. And currently, before that, I was in the mayor's office doing communications, and now I'm a grant monitor in the City of Milwaukee Community Development Grant Administration. So working with grants, again, in community development, particularly with youth organizations in our city.
I think we have time for one more quick one. So for anyone who didn't hear, since I forgot to repeat the last question, pressures on first-generation college students.
Yeah, so I think for me, in some ways, thankfully, my older sister had gone to college, but my sister was already out of the house, and so I think my parents were sort of disconnected from that experience as well. But I mean, the entire process was really self-led by me, from applying to college to figuring out where I was living. And I missed a lot of things along the way because you just don't know what you don't know, right? So for example, like things that I didn't think about, like, how am I going to get to Georgetown? I mean, I knew I had to book a flight, right? I have to book a flight. It's obviously not here. But like navigating that experience of like booking my flight for the first time on my own, so I counted on my parents for things like, hey mom, you have a credit card, right? Because I need to process this thing. So I had to lean on my parents for some things like that, but some things I had to figure out on my own. And then actually, a funny story, things that I didn't think about, like when I was first having to move in, I didn't think about the fact that I was going to need to buy like sheets and like a blanket and like things for my dorm, just because, I had depended on my parents, but just I didn't know what that experience sort of looked like of living on your own. So there were, definitely a lot of instances in which I knew, or if I was looking for internships, I knew like maybe I can't call my mom or advice, right? Just career advice. Like probably won't be able to call my parents and ask them like, is this a better fit for me or is this a better fit for me? But I could share, like struggles or like, hey mom, I'm having a hard time passing this test. And they could really kind of offer that advice. So yes, there are a lot of, I think, struggles along the way when you're first generation. And there definitely was a lot of dependency, I think, from my parents for me to really set the example for my younger brothers and sisters. Thankfully, I had a role model like my sister. But I think there was also a lot of pressure in my family because I had older siblings who maybe hadn't finished high school or who hadn't really gone down the best path. I think there was more pressure for me to make up for the things that they hadn't done right, more than anything.
I personally can't speak to being a first-generation college student because my mother is an alumni of Marquette University, but there were still a lot of challenges in traveling out of the state that we faced together as far as just communication and her worrying about me and all that stuff and navigating the city. That was all a big pressure for me my first year.
Great. I think we'll end on that. Thank you guys so much for participating. And another thank you to everyone who's helped out with the scholarship program so far. It's really cool what everyone's created here. So.
Well, thank you, Richie and Mayra and Kenyon and Eric for podcasting with us today. Thank you, Mayra and Kenyon, for sharing your experiences. And thank you all for spreading the good news about our Rotary Club Scholarship Program, and thank you for helping to make it a success. Rotary International is a world leader in the effort to eradicate polio. As a small gesture of our appreciation for your being with us today, we'll make a donation to purchase 100 doses of the polio vaccine in each of your name. 50 of those are funded from our club funds, and 50 are made possible through the generosity of our President-elect Steve Chevalier. So there'll be 100 doses of polio purchased in each of your 4 names to help bring us one step closer to a polio-free world. So thank you so much.